Are lockdowns coming back? Well, we've got to talk about that here next on Prepper Nation. Welcome to Prepper Nation. I am John. Thank you very much for watching, for listening, for hitting subscribe. It is truly appreciated. So, we got to get into lockdowns. This is something that uh I've heard it as well as a lot of you in other communities, and I've had this comment, I've had this question, could not tell you how many times within the past week. So this information is coming via an interview that was done on the War Room with Steve Bannon. He had a guest on there. She brought receipts. I actually posted those receipts to Patreon yesterday for those of you that are on Patreon. But things are beginning to sound a whole lot like late 2019. Um, I'm starting to see a lot of the news articles as we predicted. I didn't know for sure, but last week we had talked about Mr. Jones, and he broke some news a couple of weeks ago saying, "Hey, he talked to people within the government, and they kind of tipped him off to the fact that all of this was coming." And I said, keep an eye on the news, keep an eye on mainstream media. I know mainstream media stinks, man. I get it, son. But they lay groundwork there. It's very important sometimes to check it out because, to give you an example, right now, Trump is the big story. The mugshot is everywhere, and that's the new shiny thing. But what these people do, these globalists, what they do is when the new shiny thing is there, they begin laying groundwork for the next big shiny thing. All right. And this is why mainstream media is kind of important because you can get a sense of what's coming next. And I'm seeing lots and lots of articles about this new variant that we're going to get into this morning and stuff like this. I'm going to go over one specifically, but a lot of the articles lead off with, mask up if you're at risk. It sounds well enough. If you're at risk, you should be masking up anyway. You should have been doing that prior to the pandemic. Of course, then these articles are always spin into why we need mandates to return and why everybody should line up and get the updated booster that's getting ready to launch. So they're laying the groundwork, is what I'm trying to tell you. And case in point, and I'm so glad that I did this. When I heard this news that Mr. Jones dropped a couple of weeks ago, and I normally don't go to my wife and say, "Hey, look, this popped up on InfoWars or whatever." But I was thinking about schools. And I told her, I said, this man is dropping this weeks ahead of time. If we begin to see it, it's a scam. It has to be because, again, the man's not a psychic that I'm aware of. And so I told her, and she kind of just shrugged or whatever. Well, now the conversation has started at school, within the administration, that we may be having to pull back to virtual learning at some point this winter. And she had told one other person, this person is also a prepper that she works with. And she said they kind of just looked at each other because they knew, okay, there's no way Mr. Jones would have known this ahead of time unless it's a setup. So, anyway, the current timeline is September and or October of this year, and I'll explain this timeline in a second, all the way through. I hope you're sitting down for this, 2028 in some cases. So the Department of Defense is currently spending millions of dollars. Again, I dropped those receipts on Patreon. They're spending a lot of this money on test kits and things like that. They call it C-19 equipment, but specifically test kits and other things that would line up, with finding and stopping the spread within however many days or whatever ridiculous punchline they come up with this time around. The WHO, the CDC, they're both tracking a new variant called the BA.286. I don't know if this thing has a legitimate name or not, but that's it. If you want to Google it, variant BA.286. And I'm gonna take y'all back now. This is what I'm talking about when I say groundwork, okay? I'm gonna take y'all back to an article that was published by CNN, the Clinton News Network, as I like to call it, back on August the 23rd. The headline was "Time to break out masks again." And of course, it went into it. They always start with, again, if you're compromised, you may need to wear a mask. Well, that was always the case. But then it spins in, of course, to mandates and booster shots and things like this. I'm going to give you all a direct quote from the end of this article because it's unbelievable to me. Again, direct quote. And they're talking about the spread of the new variants. I liken it to the Golden Gate Bridge. You finish painting it, and the minute you're done, you've got to start all over again. End quote. So, in other words, they're making a case and they're setting the groundwork for what seems like a forever pandemic. You're going to comply. You're going to do exactly what we say. You're going to line up and take whatever we tell you to take. And then we're going to give you a little bit of normal life back until it's time to paint the bridge again, which is almost immediately, it seems like. And it comes down to this for me. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Maybe shoot a thumbs up while you're at it. Hey, it helps the channel. You cannot comply your way out of tyranny, period. You cannot comply your way out of tyranny, in this case, medical tyranny. When you have tyrants telling you what to do, you're not going to be able to keep your head down and your mouth shut and do it and expect things to get better. I'm going to make a parallel this morning because I think it's an excellent parallel that many of you will understand. Okay. Look at the Second Amendment. All right. The Second Amendment to me is cut and dry. There's no wiggle room in there whatsoever. But tyrants have, because of events and or false flags, who knows? But because of these events, they immediately go to the Second Amendment and they begin to try and wiggle within the Second Amendment. And they're like, well, we need to get rid of this type of weapon. We need to get rid of this type of setup on this type of weapon. And they start stripping things away and they try to make it make sense, even though it's not legal. They try to make it make sense because of they've sensationalized these events and they're playing on people's empathy, really and truly, and fear and all of this stuff. So, as many of you know, once they begin to do that with anything, again, the Second Amendment, they're never going to stop. When it comes to the Second Amendment, you cannot comply your way to a conclusion there. Because if you continue to comply, you're not going to have guns anymore. They're not going to stop. It's going to be this type of gun right now, or weapon, or whatever. Then it's going to be this type of magazine. And then they're going to come and they're just going to keep chipping away until there is no Second Amendment. Same parallel, again, as we're doing with the medical tyranny. You cannot give an inch. The problem that we had last time around, I think, during the actual pandemic, or as some of you like to call it, the scamdemic, is too many people complied. Too many people kept heads down, mouths shut. Too many people lived in fear. Too many people were worried about losing jobs, losing incomes, and they allowed themselves to toe the line. They did. And tyrants saw this and they're looking at this in the same way they do the Second Amendment. Okay, we got a good deal of compliance here. Let's keep driving the wedge in there. Let's keep striking it with the hammer until we get everything that we want. Some colleges right now are calling for the return of masks and mandates. Rutgers is the biggest. There are a few others, um, smaller colleges and things. Public schools will follow suit. If colleges begin to do this now, as we talked about earlier this week, it's not going to be in every location, every state, I don't think. But let's just say you're in New York State and a college does this. Well, public schools are gonna follow suit because they're ran by the same type of people, right? And this is going to spread throughout the nation. Again, not in all states, but we're going to return to the world that we used to live in during the pandemic. Big Pharma is rolling out updated boosters. They've already announced this. You can Google it in September. They said this one is new and improved. They refer to this new variant as the grandchild of the last scary variant. They said it's, son, it's mutated. And so we've had to go in, we've had to change the booster. But good news, in September, it's going to be available to everyone. And it's going to be offered right alongside the seasonal flu shot. Now, why would they do this? Okay. This is not random placement here. Okay. You're already going in to get the flu shot. They're going to pitch this new booster, this new whiskey shot, as being just as safe and as effective as the seasonal flu shot. And in some cases, they may even combine them. This happened some during the pandemic. They were just combining them, and they weren't actually telling people unless people were asking specifically. We ran into that issue, as a matter of fact. Um, US hospitalizations are up nearly 22%, if you are to believe that, uh, due to the new strain of C-19. Now, that's coming from mainstream media. Take that with a grain of salt. 22%. All right, we're not far away from hearing the news in mainstream media again that hospitals are completely overwhelmed, get the meat trucks down here, and the whole 9 yards, all of that jazz. We're slowly making a return back to that as a country because they expect compliance. Do y'all remember those, books, Choose Your Own Adventure? I know it sounds random, right? They used to make us read them in high school. Choose Your Own Adventure, where you get to a certain page and you actually, as the reader, get to make a choice. It's time to choose your own adventure here. All right. And this is a book that we've read before. That's the good news. We already know the playbook. If you choose to keep your head down and your mouth shut and do whatever your employer tells you you have to do, you don't actually have to do it. But if your employer browbeats you into it once again, you know how this ends. It ends with masks, it ends with fear campaigns, and people, as we said last week, walking around with their eyes wide open out of fear. This ends with 6 feet apart. This ends with, just a lot of billboards and propaganda and on the sides of buses and stuff like this. Line up and do your part. Be a good little citizen and do your part because we're telling you to. This ends with the new normal, right? Uh, Jacked up store hours, an even further crashed economy. It's just no good. And it ends with the fact that you must comply. If you want out of this and back to your normal life, you must comply. If that's the adventure you choose, you're going to relive it. Or you can choose to live your life, not out of fear, not with a face diaper on 24/7, not having a Thanksgiving dinner where you're not allowed to open the windows because the new variant might creep in like the boogeyman, or your neighbors might snitch on you, something like this. Just live your life. Absolutely refuse. Be ungovernable, as I've heard y'all put in chat, and I've seen that. And I love that, by the way. Be ungovernable. Don't just be a mindless drone out here doing what the people around you are doing, because we know where that gets us, right? There was too much of that going on during 2019, 2020, 2021. So yeah, I've heard lockdowns may be returning sometime in Decemberish. There's no way for me to verify that. There's no way for me to know for sure. I've seen the playbook. I've seen the stuff that Alex Jones has dropped. I'm starting to see it play out, but again, I'm not sitting in these meetings with the CDC, so I don't know for sure. Yes, we could see lockdowns coming back this winter, but I refuse to be locked down, and that's all there is to it. Somebody asked in chat yesterday, when lockdowns happen, will these only affect people that haven't taken the whiskey shot? And my response to that is it's only going to affect you if you allow it to affect you. If you are ungovernable and you are not willing to toe the line and play ball, so to speak, doesn't matter anyway. They can pick whatever group they want to out of a burlap sack for all I care. I'm not going to be locked down. I'm not wearing face diapers because to me, that's not freedom. It's supposed to be free here in the United States of America, last time I checked, and that doesn't seem like freedom to me. That seems like medical tyranny to me. We've got to make a stand at some point, folks. We have to let these people know game over, not doing this anymore. Nobody else is going to make a stand. We have to make a stand, or they're just going to continue to do it. Just like we were talking about with the Second Amendment. They're going to keep chipping away till you take the hammer away or you take the pickaxe away. No more chipping, son. We're done playing this game. Um, what is that quote? The beatings will continue until morale improves. That's the way these people are looking at us. The WHO, the CDC, the DOD, the White House. They're looking at the civilian population and they're saying, you know what? The beatings will continue until morale improves. Till we see total compliance, the beatings will continue. And my reply to that would be there are more of us than there are of you. And that's never a good place to be, whether you got a whip or a stick or whatever. When the majority get tired of it, when the majority are pissed off about it, when the majority realize that they're the majority and they're just not going to do it anymore, the threats don't work. Folks, this is John with Prepper Nation. Thank you very much for checking this out on a Saturday. I hope you guys have a blessed weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Take care.